Hey guys, tonight we begin a quiet journey. Not forward, not backward, but inward. You've come here carrying a version of yourself that once felt essential. Maybe it was the self you were supposed to become. The one who made all the right choices. The one who didn't mess things up. The version that succeeded, thrived, never stumbled. But here's the truth, you're not that person. And that's okay. You lie there now, eyes soft, body slowing, and something deep in you still whispers, "You could have been more." That voice, it's familiar, isn't it? Not loud, not cruel, but persistent. Like a ghost of a possibility pacing the edge of your awareness. And tonight, we're going to walk with it. Not to chase it down or silence it, but to listen, to understand, and gently, eventually, let it go. You will not be punished for not becoming someone else. The world has its chaos, its turns, its losses, but you are not defined by detours. You are not the echo of an alternate timeline. You are here now in this breath, in this room, in this stillness. You will not be everything you once dreamed of, and you were never meant to be. That's not defeat, it's release. A quiet reminder if you need it. You will never control the world, but you can always learn to guide yourself within it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Feel free to comment below where you're listening from and what time it is in your part of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts with a memory, a hallway. You're standing in front of a mirror. Maybe you're younger, sharper, ambitious. Or maybe it's just last week, trying to convince yourself you haven't missed something essential. There's that version again, the one you could have been. You imagine their routine, their choices, their wins. They exercised more. They studied harder. They were brave at the fork in the road where you hesitated. You catch yourself admiring them and resenting yourself. Funny, isn't it? How we're so kind to the people we imagine and so cruel to the person we are. Stoicism reminds us, we suffer not from the thing itself, but from our judgment about the thing. You haven't failed because you didn't become someone else. You've simply lived. And living, by nature, includes veering, pausing, choosing safety when you weren't ready for risk. But still, the weight remains. The phantom life shadows your real one. Why does it hurt so much to see what might have been? Because we're creatures of potential. We cling to possibility like it's identity. But possibility is not destiny, it's just weather. Wind blowing in a direction we don't have to follow. And yet the pain of letting it go feels like a little death. A mourning. So tonight you don't avoid it, you sit with it, breathe with it. You remember Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire yet still scribbled self-reminders late into the night. Stop hoping for the perfect life, embrace the one you are in. Even emperors wonder if they could have done better. Now that idea feels oddly comforting, doesn't it? You aren't broken for having regrets. You aren't unwise for looking back sometimes. You are simply human. And the Stoic path isn't about silencing your feelings, it's about understanding them, walking beside them without letting them drive. Let's look at that mirror again. Not to judge, just to see. This imagined self you see now, it's not a person. It's a monument built out of comparison, of media, of pressure, of family expectations, of old teachers' praise, of Instagram filters, of 10-year plans. You didn't shape it, life did. You just tried to live up to it. But what if that wasn't your job? The Stoics teach us that virtue, being just, brave, wise, and temperate, is all that's needed. Not fame, not success, not some grand arc of glory, just presence. Just effort in the moment, just honesty with yourself. Can you feel your shoulders drop a little? You don't owe your imagined self anything. They never paid rent. They never lived your days. They never walked in your exact shoes. They never faced your quiet battles. You did. That counts for more than you think. And here comes the first paradox. The more you release who you could have been, the closer you come to who you truly are. Because right beneath the story is the soul. It doesn't care how impressive you seem. It doesn't need applause. It wants alignment with what's real, with what's true, with what serves you now. You listen and the thought comes like a breeze. I'm tired of pretending I'm behind. I'm not behind, I'm alive. Yes, you are. There's a part of you that has never been late, never fallen short. A stillness beneath the striving. That part is waiting patiently for you to remember it, not to improve it, not to shape it, just to return. You don't need to become more, you need to become here. Breathe in. You're not what could have been. You are what is, and what is enough. You remember now a time when you gave everything you had. Maybe it was for a career, a relationship, a dream that felt so close you could taste it. You weren't lazy. You weren't careless. You showed up, stayed up, tried your best. You worked with all the hope you had. And still, it didn't go the way you imagined. That memory presses softly against you now. Not like a wound, but like an old bruise you sometimes forget is there, until something touches it just right. It hurts, not because you didn't try, but because you did. And effort in our minds is supposed to mean reward. It's the story we were told. Push hard enough and you'll get there. Believe long enough and you'll become it. But reality doesn't always sign that agreement. And that more than failure is what breaks the heart. You lie still as the room hums around you, faint fan in the background, maybe a dog shifting in the neighbor's yard. And you wonder, was it all for nothing? The Stoics would say no, because effort is your domain, outcome is not. Epictetus made this clear. Your actions, your choices, your will, these are yours, but what follows isn't. We influence, but we do not command. We move, but we do not control the tide. So here's another paradox to sit with. Your greatest power is not in making things happen, but in aligning with what is yours to do, regardless of result. You remember a time you studied all night and still failed the test, or prepared for weeks and still didn't get the job. You remember the relationship you tried to save, even when your hands were raw from holding on. And what happened? Life moved anyway. It didn't consult your effort, it didn't adjust itself for your optimism, but you changed, quietly, deeply, and that's worth more than the reward you never got. You see, the effort you gave didn't vanish. It became part of you. The discipline, the courage, the showing up when it hurt, that shaped something inside, something durable, something invisible but permanent. We often judge success by external milestones, but the Stoics invite us to look inward. What did you learn? What did you strengthen? What did you prove to yourself, not the world? The world didn't applaud, but you kept going. That counts. And now something else begins to rise, not grief but clarity. You were never the problem, the story was. The story that said hard work guarantees outcome. The story that turned success into a contract. But life isn't a contract, it's a canvas. You paint, but the wind might still come. You sing, but the echo isn't promised. Still, you sing. Take a moment here. Think about one moment where you gave your all. Let it come to you, not to judge, but to witness. What was true about you in that moment? Was it failure, or was it loyalty to something bigger than results? You remember the story of Cleans, once a boxer, later a water carrier in Athens, hauling jugs of water all night to pay for philosophy lessons during the day. He had nothing to show for years. People mocked him, yet he kept going. Why? Because the work was shaping him long before anyone noticed. You don't need applause to validate your effort. The act of trying with integrity is already a complete sentence. Still, there's that ache, isn't there? It says, if I tried that hard and didn't succeed, what's the point of trying again? That's where many stop, but you're not here to stop. You're here to see deeper. What if effort is not an investment with guaranteed return, but a declaration of who you are? You try, not because it always works. You try because that's what people of virtue do. You brush your teeth, not because it makes your day perfect, but because it's the right thing to do. You offer kindness, not because it guarantees kindness in return, but because it reflects your nature. You put in effort not to control life, but to align with your values. And slowly, you notice the tension loosen. You don't need to keep proving yourself to your past. You've already done the work. Now your task is simpler: stay in alignment. Offer your effort freely. Let go of what comes. Even now you feel it, somewhere near your chest, a quiet hum of self-respect. The kind that comes not from success but from having shown up. Maybe you never became that ideal you, but you became someone who didn't quit. That matters. And that little flicker you feel now, that's the freedom Stoicism points to. The freedom that blooms not from outcomes but from inner steadiness. From knowing I did what I could, I will keep doing what is right, and that's enough. You lie there, a little more still now, and something in your memory stirs, a moment you don't often speak of. Maybe it comes in quietly like dust through a window slit, a missed opportunity, a turn you didn't take, a version of your life that stayed sealed in another timeline. And there it is, regret. It's not loud, it's not cruel. It's more like a mirror. One you don't look into often, but when you do, it shows you what might have been. It shows you not just events, but alternate selves, confident, untangled, always choosing right. You see yourself saying yes instead of no, staying instead of leaving, moving instead of freezing. That you in the mirror did everything you couldn't, or wouldn't, or didn't know how to. And your heart aches, not for that person but for what they represent. Not for that path but for the illusion that your real one fell short. Regret, the Stoics teach, is a distortion, a relic of our desire for perfect control in an imperfect world. It offers you a fantasy. If only this had happened, then everything would have aligned. But that fantasy is a trap, a loop. You can't live in if only. You can only live in this. Still, the feeling is human. Seneca himself wrote about wasted time with a kind of reverent sadness. He called it one of the few things we lose without realizing we gave it away. But notice this, even regret is a sign that you've grown. You now look back with wiser eyes. The choices you regret were made by someone with less clarity. You can't expect yesterday's self to have today's insight. Imagine walking up to a child and scolding them for not running a marathon. That's what you do when you judge your past self from your current perspective. It's unkind, unjust. Instead, try this. See regret not as failure but as reflection, not as punishment but as presence. You feel it because you care. You mourn it because you're awake, and that is something. Let's stay with that image, the mirror. You stare into it, not trying to escape it this time, not reaching for another life, just breathing. You see the version of yourself that never stumbled, never doubted. And then slowly, you let that version nod and fade. Not because it's false, but because it's finished. You don't need them anymore. You are allowed to mourn the life you didn't live without disrespecting the one you are living. A story comes to mind about a man who spent his life preparing to be a musician only to lose his hearing in his 20s. He wept, of course, raged, but eventually he began composing with new tools, vibrations, memory, collaboration. He never performed as he imagined, but what he created was his. He let go of the musician he thought he would be and made music anyway. That's you in a way. You let go not in anger, not in bitterness, but in recognition. The life you dreamed of belonged to someone who never had all the information. Now you do. And with that comes the power to choose again. Here's the subtle danger of regret. It often disguises itself as a map. If I keep looking at the past, I'll figure out how to fix the future. But that's not a map. That's a maze. The more you loop, the more lost you become. So the Stoic answer isn't to get over it. That's too harsh, too fast. The Stoic answer is to acknowledge the regret, sit with it, learn what it's pointing to, and then act in the present. That's where your control lives. You are not at war with your past. You're in conversation with it. And some conversations take time. Let yourself grieve the unlived life. Give it a quiet funeral if you must. Light a candle in your mind. Thank it for its shape, its meaning, its part in your becoming. Then turn gently away, not to forget, but to begin again. Here's a curious question. What if the life you didn't live spared you in ways you'll never fully understand? We imagine the better path as safer, brighter, smoother. But the Stoics knew, often, the jagged road is the one that sharpens us. The missed turn protects us. The unanswered wish makes room for something truer. So you begin to feel it, not a loss but a softening, like muscles relaxing after long-held tension. The weight of what could have been starts to lift. Not all at once, but enough. And maybe, just maybe, you realize the mirror isn't here to remind you of what you're not. It's here to show you what you've carried all along. That despite the regrets, despite the wrong turns, despite the missed exits, you're still here, you're still trying, you're still becoming. And that's the real life. There's a voice in your head, not the calm one, not the curious one, the other one, you know it well. It doesn't shout, it doesn't scream, but it's relentless. You should have done more, you should have been better. You had your chance and you wasted it. That voice follows you into quiet places, into early mornings and late nights. It doesn't care how tired you are or how hard you've tried. It holds you to impossible standards and never once thanks you for trying to meet them. That's your inner critic. And tonight, you're going to look it in the eye, not to argue, not to fight, but to understand. Because the Stoics would say, if you don't examine your own thoughts, you become ruled by them. What we don't question, we obey, so you begin. You listen, not blindly, but curiously. Why does that voice sound like that old teacher? Why does it use the same words your parent once used? Why does it speak in absolutes, in ultimatums, in unfinished sentences that hang over you like clouds? You realize something. That voice is made of echoes, of conditioning, of fears passed down from others, of moments where you internalized shame thinking it would help you improve. But shame doesn't sharpen, it dulls, it shrinks, it freezes. Your critic isn't your enemy, but it is outdated. It's a protective mechanism built from old maps. It tries to keep you safe by making you small. If you don't reach too high, it reasons, you can't fall too hard. But you're not here to live afraid of your own height. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." And if your thoughts are soaked in judgment, then the way you see yourself, your choices, your past, your worth, will all appear tainted. So tonight you ask the voice a question it's never been asked. Whose standards are you using? The voice falters just a little, you keep going. Are they even mine? Are they reasonable? Are they fair? Silence now. And in that space, something new can emerge, compassion, not as sentimentality but as strength. The Stoics practiced self-examination, not self-punishment. The goal wasn't to shame the soul but to tune it like an instrument, to find its harmony, to help it play the right notes. You remember someone you once admired, a friend, a mentor, maybe a stranger who seemed so composed, and you remember realizing much later that they also struggled. They also doubted themselves. That memory humbles you, reminds you, no one gets through unscathed, not even those who appear unbreakable. So why should you? What if strength isn't never falling, but getting back up without turning the fall into a moral failure? You think now of the craftsman who chips away at stone day after day. The progress is slow, invisible even, but one day a shape appears, a form, something real, that's you. Quietly, steadily sculpting a life. Not to impress the world, but to align with your values. And here comes the Stoic principle, rising like a tide. Control what is yours, release the rest. Your inner critic demands control over the uncontrollable. Outcomes, others' opinions, the past. But you can reclaim your power by staying rooted in what you can guide, your intention, your attention, your response. So the next time the voice says, "You failed," you respond gently, "No, I showed up. I learned, I lived." That's not failure, that's practice. And when it says, "You're not good enough," you ask, good enough for whose story? Mine or someone else's? You don't have to banish the critic. You just stop handing it the pen. Let it speak. But don't let it write your name in stone. You are not the worst thing you've done. You are not the thing you didn't finish. You are not the sum of your second guesses. You are a human being capable, aware, changing. You are allowed to change your mind, to change your pace, to change the way you speak to yourself. Breathe. You can't outrun the inner critic, but you can outgrow it. You're doing that now, bit by bit, word by word. You lie in the hush of the room and the thought creeps in, unexpected, quiet but firm. What if I'm not a work in progress? You've heard that phrase before. Work in progress. It sounds noble, humble, even comforting. A soft way of saying, I'm not there yet, but I will be. You've used it to excuse your flaws, to justify your pace, and for a time it helped. But tonight it feels heavier than it should, because beneath the comfort there's a quiet pressure, a sense that your real self is still out there somewhere, waiting to be built, achieved, perfected. That who you are now is just a draft, rough, unpolished, almost but not quite enough. And the truth is, that belief is exhausting. So tonight, you ask something radical. What if I am not a rough draft? What if I am already whole? The Stoics didn't speak in terms of self-improvement the way we do today. They spoke of alignment, of living in accordance with nature and reason. They didn't ask you to become perfect. They asked you to become present. And presence, by its nature, doesn't wait for future versions. So you start there, with this breath, this moment, this version of you, not imagined, not optimized, not someday, just here. You sit with the idea that perhaps you don't need constant fixing, that you're not a broken version of a better self, that you're not a placeholder for someone wiser, fitter, more composed, that maybe you're simply you. And suddenly the pace slows. You remember a tree, not a specific one, just the image of it. Its crooked branches, the way it leans slightly toward the light, not symmetrical but strong. It doesn't apologize for where it grew. It doesn't wish to be straighter, taller, better aligned with someone's aesthetic. It just is. So what if you, like the tree, are not flawed but shaped? Shaped by wind and time, by decisions and detours, by joys and griefs you could never have predicted. Not perfect, but precisely what this version of you needed to become. You're not an incomplete manuscript. You're a living story. You recall Epictetus again, who taught that our judgments, not events, disturb us. And one of the harshest judgments is the belief that you're insufficient until you heal, until you succeed, until you change. But the Stoic view says, no, you're already equipped. The only task is to return to your reason, to your core, not to strive endlessly for some imagined final form. That imagined form is a mirage. Every time you near it, it shifts. The goalposts move. You lose years chasing it, forgetting that the soul doesn't need to be more. It only needs to be true. You sit with that idea and it softens something inside. You remember an old friend who always apologized for who they were, for being too emotional, too disorganized, not where they should be. You watch them shrink themselves in conversations, downplay their joy, preempt their value with disclaimers. And one day they stopped. They simply decided, I'm not going to keep acting like I'm waiting to arrive. That shift didn't make them arrogant. It made them present. And that presence, unapologetic, quiet, grounded, is what you feel stirring in you now. Not the need to become, but the grace to be. Here's another paradox. When you stop trying to constantly improve yourself, you make room to actually live. To respond, not just refine. To experience, not just edit. To trust, not just tweak. The Stoics weren't chasing perfection. They were practicing integrity. And integrity doesn't require you to be flawless. It asks you to be aligned, to live what you value, to stop hiding from yourself in the name of improvement. So you whisper now, not to the world but to the voice inside. I am not behind. I am not lesser. I am not in waiting. I am here. Let that sink in. You don't need to wait for a better version of yourself to live with self-respect, or to speak kindly to yourself, or to rest, or to forgive. You're not a half-finished person. You are not someone waiting to be fixed. You are someone learning to see their shape and stand in it without apology. There was a time, not so long ago, when you chased perfection. You remember how it began. Maybe it was subtle. A few compliments when you did something exceptionally well. The look of approval when you achieved more than expected. The internal glow that came from being the best, or at least trying to be. And so you ran toward it, toward the version of yourself that never disappointed, never hesitated, never fell short. You organized your days around it, tried to sharpen every edge, smoothed over your flaws, made contingency plans, then contingency plans for those contingency plans. You raised the bar higher and higher. It didn't matter if it made you tired, or brittle, or lonely. Perfection didn't care, it just kept calling. Until one day you missed the mark, maybe by an inch, maybe by a mile, and everything cracked. Not just the task, but something deeper, your sense of worth which had been lashed so tightly to doing things right. And suddenly you didn't just fail. You were a failure, or so you believed. That's the danger of chasing perfect. It's never a destination. It's a treadmill. The faster you run, the faster the belt moves. No arrival, only exhaustion. The Stoics saw this clearly. They didn't believe in flawless execution. They believed in wise response, in being able to meet each moment not with polished elegance but with practiced steadiness. There's a story about Socrates, once seen standing still, unmoving in the middle of a crowded street. Someone asked him what he was doing. He replied, "I am preparing to speak so that when I do, it will not be to impress, but to say something necessary. No flourish, just purpose." That's what perfection tends to forget, that the essence of life is not to impress, it's to participate. You think now of all the little things you avoided out of fear they wouldn't be perfect. The songs you didn't sing, the stories you didn't write, the gatherings you didn't attend, the first steps you didn't take because you feared they wouldn't be flawless. But life doesn't reward perfection, it responds to presence. Even Marcus Aurelius, whose meditations remain admired centuries later, didn't write them to be immortal. He wrote in fragments, messy ones, notes to himself. He likely never intended for anyone to read them. But they're beautiful, not because they're perfect, but because they're honest. So tonight, you let yourself drop the act. You stop performing for a judge that doesn't exist. You feel your body relax in response. Your shoulders lower. Your jaw unclenches. There's no test right now. No comparison. No scoreboard, just breath, just being. And here's the paradox. When you let go of trying to be perfect, you create space for something better, authenticity. Authenticity doesn't need applause. It doesn't need angles or polish. It needs truth. The kind that resonates not because it's tidy, but because it's real. You remember a conversation you had, maybe long ago, where someone opened up to you, not with flawless words, but with trembling honesty. You didn't walk away thinking they failed. You walked away feeling closer to them, because realness connects. Perfection isolates. That's the irony. The very thing you thought would earn you love, flawlessness, was the thing that kept you from feeling seen. So you make a choice, here in the dark, to stop managing your image. Let them see the cracks. Let them hear the stumbles. Let yourself speak even when the words aren't perfect. Because life isn't a sculpture, it's a garden. It grows wild. It dies and renews. It's messy and unpredictable, but alive. And isn't that more beautiful than something carved and frozen? The Stoics knew that. They didn't seek control over nature, they sought harmony with it, including human nature, including their own. You are nature. You are meant to flow, not to freeze in pursuit of a still, spotless image. So you breathe now softer and whisper something inwardly, not a mantra, not a declaration. Just a quiet understanding. I am done chasing perfect. I choose real. I choose enough. And something inside you finally exhales, not in resignation, but in release, not falling but landing. There's a place inside you, a quiet, dusty corner where your old ambitions lie, not in shame, not in bitterness, just there, like a forgotten shelf of notebooks that once mattered more than anything. You visit this place tonight, not to retrieve those dreams, but to finally honor their rest. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? You once built so much of your identity around them, that future you were sure of, the title, the milestones, the version of success that felt so vital. You lit candles for those dreams, prayed to them, made sacrifices on their behalf, your time, your sleep, your peace. But things changed, or maybe you changed. And now you stand in the soft graveyard of expectations. It's not as bleak as it sounds. There's no morning music, no dramatic collapse, just silence. Gentle, reverent. You walk past the headstones of who you thought you'd marry, where you thought you'd live, what you thought you'd do by now. You kneel at one, maybe the dream of becoming someone admired, respected, the person who finally got it all together. It didn't happen, but instead of punishing yourself for that, you whisper, "Thank you," because that dream carried you for a time. It moved you when nothing else could. It gave you direction even if it wasn't the final one. And now its work is done. The Stoics didn't fear the end of plans. They welcomed adaptability. Life, they taught, is a flow, not a fortress. Clinging to fixed expectations is like gripping ice. It melts anyway, and all you're left with is cold, wet hands. You remember the words of Epictetus, not in quotation but in spirit. When something no longer serves you, release it. Do not cry over the spilled oil. Clean it up and move forward. Tonight you clean up. Gently. You don't scold yourself for wanting those things. You simply accept they no longer match the person you're becoming. That is not weakness. That is growth. And growth means funerals. Not just for people, but for identities, roles, timelines. The self that thought it needed to arrive by now. You feel a small sadness. That's natural. But look closer. It's not despair. It's space. The space that opens when you stop dragging expectations behind you like suitcases through an airport you're no longer flying out of. So you stand there in this internal graveyard and notice the stillness. It's not empty, it's sacred. Because in letting those dreams go, you free your hands, you free your time, you free your heart to notice what is. Not the life that was planned, but the life that is real. Here's another paradox. The fewer expectations you carry, the more life surprises you. You begin to notice small beauties again. The quiet kindness of a stranger. The way the wind moves through leaves. The richness of things that don't need to be big to matter. You stop measuring life in headlines and start feeling it in details. This is not giving up. This is making room. You remember a friend who changed careers at 40. Not because they failed, but because they outgrew the dream. They said, I thought I wanted to be a teacher. Turned out I just wanted to be useful. And so they became a hospice nurse. Found deeper meaning in goodbye than they ever found in lecture halls. That's the freedom of burying the form of the dream while preserving its essence. What did your old ambitions really stand for? Recognition, connection, joy. Those are still available, just in new forms. You don't need to resurrect the old goals. You just need to listen for what still matters and let it take new shape. That's what the Stoics meant by harmony with nature. Not submission. Not apathy, but responsiveness. The oak does not mourn the acorn. And you do not have to mourn the version of yourself that never fully bloomed. They were never meant to last. Only to help you grow into someone who sees more clearly now. So you whisper one more time, not a farewell but a benediction. Thank you, old dreams, rest well. And then you walk away. Lighter, freer. With no map but with something better, an openness to whatever comes next. You've heard the word control so many times it's almost lost its shape. Take control of your life. Control your destiny. Be in control of your emotions, your time, your outcomes. But tonight, in this quieter space, you feel a truth beneath all that noise. You don't control as much as you think. And strangely, that realization doesn't feel like a loss. It feels like permission. Permission to breathe again. Control, as we often imagine it, is a myth stitched together from our fears. It tells us that if we just plan well enough, prepare long enough, perform flawlessly, we can force life to obey. But life doesn't obey. It dances, it stumbles. It rains when we plan for sun. It turns right when we hoped for left. And the Stoics, especially Epictetus, saw through this illusion. He taught that control is not about tightening your grip on the world. It's about loosening your grip on what was never yours in the first place. What is yours truly? Your thoughts, your choices, your responses, that's it. You can't control the weather, but you can choose how to walk through the storm. You can't control the past, but you can choose what story you tell about it. You can't control who loves you, leaves you, misunderstands you, but you can choose the clarity you meet yourself with. And once you really understand that, something shifts. The weight you've carried of outcomes, of blame, of trying to make everything just right begins to lift. Because now you see, you're only responsible for your role, not the full performance. You remember a time you tried to fix something that wasn't yours to fix. Maybe it was a relationship, a workplace, a broken friendship. You adjusted yourself endlessly, walked on eggshells. Rewrote your voice into smaller, softer lines, hoping that maybe if you could just do everything perfectly it would stay. But it didn't, and you blamed yourself. Now, from this distance, you realize you did what you could, what was yours to do, and the rest was never yours. That's not an excuse. That's a boundary, and boundaries, as the Stoics knew, are essential to sanity. Think of Marcus Aurelius commanding an empire during plague and war. Even he knew that external chaos could not be stilled, so he turned inward. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Not power over people, not over fate, just over how he met each hour. And so can you. Take this moment now, a small inventory. Can you change the past? No. Can you predict exactly how tomorrow will unfold? No. Can you prevent loss, pain, or disappointment from ever touching you again? No. But can you be honest? Yes. Can you choose to act with integrity? Yes. Can you return to yourself even when the world feels unrecognizable? Yes. That's control, real control, not over everything, but over you. And here's the paradox: when you stop trying to control what you never could, you begin to feel more powerful, not less. Because your energy stops leaking into things you can't move, and starts fueling the only thing that ever mattered, the kind of person you're becoming. So you feel it now, that slight but unmistakable shift inside. A return to center. A reminder that peace is not the result of fixing everything. It's the result of knowing what doesn't need fixing. You let go of the invisible strings, the ones you've been pulling on for years, believing they'd eventually make everything align. They don't, they only tangle you, so you cut them, one by one, not out of spite, not out of giving up, but out of understanding, and in their place, stillness. You no longer reach where your hand was never meant to go. You turn it inward and use it to steady your own breath, your own actions, your own principles. That is not small work. That is the whole point. It's strange how heavy expectations can become, even the ones you set for yourself. Especially the ones you set for yourself. You lie here, remembering not what others wanted from you, but what you expected from you. The silent contracts you wrote and signed without even noticing. By this age I will. Once I finish this, I should already. If I don't accomplish that, it means I've failed. Who wrote those terms? Where did they come from? You think back. Maybe it was a version of yourself from 5, 10, 20 years ago. Full of fire, full of ideals, trying to make sense of a chaotic world by building a straight path through it. But life doesn't walk in straight lines. It bends, loops, doubles back. Sometimes it sits down and refuses to move. And the person you are today is not the same one who made those promises. The Stoics would nod at this, not in dismissal, but in understanding, because they knew that life unfolds according to its own logic, not yours. And to cling to rigid expectations is to guarantee frustration. Seneca said it clearly, if not gently. We suffer more in imagination than in reality. And what is expectation, if not imagined suffering disguised as hope? You look at your life now not as a courtroom but as a garden. Some seeds grew, some didn't. Some flowers bloomed you never planted, others withered before they could open. You did not fail. The season simply changed. So tonight you ask a different question, not, why didn't I become what I was supposed to? But who am I becoming now that I've let go of who I was supposed to be? You feel the difference in your chest. One question chokes. The other releases. Expectations shrink the present. They make today feel like a problem to solve rather than a moment to live. But once you loosen their grip, something else arrives: curiosity. You begin to wonder, what happens when I show up without a script? Who am I when I stop measuring myself against someone I never actually was? You think of a friend who changed course late in life. They didn't apologize for arriving at something new. They simply began again, quietly, without fanfare, without needing to prove that it was part of the plan. Because it wasn't, and that was okay. The Stoics didn't demand consistency of narrative. They demanded honesty of response. You're allowed to adapt. You're allowed to rewrite. You're allowed to live a life that doesn't line up with the bullet points. And that requires something rarer than achievement, humility. The humility to say, I was wrong about what I thought I needed. The humility to start over without bitterness. The humility to be where you are instead of where you should be. This is not settling. This is arriving. So tonight you arrive. You don't try to fix the story, you let it be messy, unresolved, beautiful in its refusal to make perfect sense. And here's the paradox. The less you demand of the future, the more space it has to surprise you. You remember Marcus Aurelius, scribbling in the quiet hours of his tent, not commanding armies but reminding himself that peace is internal. That freedom is not the fulfillment of expectation, but the release of it. So you whisper to yourself now, not as a resignation, but as a liberation. I let go of the version of me that never lived. I honor them, but I no longer serve them. I choose this moment, and the unknown that follows. You feel a softening again, like your body recognizing that the war is over, not because you won, not because you lost, but because you realized there was no war, only misunderstanding. The expectations you carried were never rules, they were guesses, and you are allowed to guess again. So here you are, no longer chasing, no longer hiding, no longer grading yourself on someone else's rubric, just breathing, just being. And maybe, just maybe, that's more than enough. There's a moment, maybe you felt it when the noise finally settles. Not because the world gets quiet, but because you do. It's not dramatic. It doesn't come with thunder or music. It's more like walking into an empty room where you thought a crowd would be and realizing you can breathe again. That's the beginning of inner freedom. It's subtle, unimpressive if judged from the outside, but on the inside something vital shifts. A thread you didn't know was pulled tight begins to loosen. And for the first time in a long time, you don't feel like you owe anyone an explanation. Not for your pace, not for your choices, not even for your healing. This is what the Stoics meant when they spoke of freedom, not the kind granted by society or won through victory, but the freedom of the soul. The kind that whispers, you are already enough, you just forgot. You've been carrying so many invisible debts. A need to prove, to fix, to outperform, to redeem. And each of those debts attached itself to your identity, until you began to believe you were only as good as your next improvement. But now you sit with the thought, what if I am no longer in debt to the past? Not because you got it all right, but because you are done trying to earn your own humanity. You remember someone who carried themselves that way, not proudly but lightly, like they had nothing to defend. They moved slower, laughed easily. They didn't need to be the smartest in the room because they weren't trying to win anything. That is the texture of inner freedom. It looks like simplicity. It feels like rest. And it begins with this, surrendering the idea that you're behind. You're not behind, you're not late, you're not defective. You're a human being in process, not a project with a deadline. And when you stop racing, you notice things. The sound of your own breath, the weight of your body on the bed, the way the air shifts near your feet. You return to this exact moment, this inhale, this exhale, and you realize with quiet wonder, this is mine. Not the world's, not the critics', not some ideal self's version of how it should be. Just yours. The Stoics would call this the moment of ascent, when you stop resisting what is and begin to accept it, not passively but consciously. You say yes to reality, not because it's perfect but because it's real. And in that yes you reclaim your life, even the painful parts, the things that didn't work out, the people who left, the opportunities that fell through, the versions of yourself that didn't last. They're part of it, not detours, not failures. Just pages in a book that's still being written. You are allowed to love your story even if it's not tidy, even if the chapters aren't evenly spaced, even if the ending is still a mystery. You sit with this and something deep inside lets go, not of ambition but of pressure, not of goals but of grasping. You can still care, still try, still grow, but you no longer do it from fear. You do it from freedom. Freedom to move, freedom to be misunderstood, freedom to disappoint people who were never meant to understand you fully. You think again of Marcus Aurelius, The emperor who wrote in his journal that it didn't matter if people knew his name or admired his work. What mattered was whether he had lived justly, honestly, and with attention to what was his to do. That's what you're doing now. You're living with attention. You're noticing how it feels to stop running. You're discovering what remains when the striving settles. You're beginning to hear yourself beneath the noise, beneath the roles, beneath the rules. And what you hear is steady, quiet, strong. A voice not trying to impress or prove or perfect, just one that says, I am here. I am enough. I am free. You close your eyes, and you find yourself remembering the moments that didn't go the way you hoped. Not the dramatic ones, not the collapse or the heartbreak, but the quieter misses, the words you meant to say and didn't, the kindness you held back, the courage that never quite made it to your voice. They come back now, not as punishment but as memory. You feel the pang, a slight ache in the chest, that unmistakable twinge of I wish I had. But tonight you don't turn away from it. You don't try to rewrite it or explain it away. You simply sit with it, acknowledge it. I was afraid. I wasn't ready. I didn't know how. The Stoics were not strangers to this kind of reflection. They practiced it deliberately. Every evening they examined their day, not to condemn themselves, but to learn. They asked, what did I do well? Where did I fall short? What could I do differently? Not with shame, but with sincerity. Seneca wrote that no one is so old they can't start improving, and no one so young they shouldn't begin. An improvement for the Stoics wasn't about impressing others. It was about aligning yourself with your highest values, truth, courage, justice, self-restraint. And part of that alignment means acknowledging when you acted from fear instead. You think of a moment, not long ago, when you stayed silent out of self-protection, or didn't take the opportunity because failure felt unbearable. You told yourself, I'll try next time, but part of you wondered if next time would ever come. But even in that hesitation, there was wisdom. You were doing the best you could with the tools you had. And maybe you were simply waiting, like a seed in winter, for the season to be right. That's not weakness. That's timing. And yet, now that you know more, now that you feel more, you can choose differently. You don't need to become a perfect speaker or a fearless warrior. You just need to begin showing up with a little more honesty, a little more presence, a little less armor. You think of someone you admire, not for their brilliance but for their realness. The way they admit when they're unsure, the way they laugh when they stumble, the way they don't flinch from their own shadow. That's strength. The quiet kind. And it's available to you too. You don't need to go back and fix every moment you regret. That's not the path. The past isn't a puzzle to solve, it's a compass to consult. You look back not to live there, but to understand what kind of person you're ready to be now. And if regret arises, let it soften you. Let it remind you of your values. Let it shape how you speak tomorrow, or listen tomorrow, or hold yourself with more gentleness tomorrow. The Stoics taught that each moment is a fresh opportunity to live with virtue, to act from reason, to move with awareness. No matter how many times you've missed that chance before, you are not disqualified by your past. You are refined by it. You lie here now, and maybe for the first time, you feel a kind of peace with the version of yourself who didn't always get it right. You forgive them. Not because everything they did was fine, but because they were trying, surviving, becoming. And now you continue that work, quietly, honestly. You won't catch every moment. You'll still miss a few things, but that's okay. The goal isn't perfection, it's presence. The kind of presence that sees clearly, speaks truthfully, and forgives freely. So here in the dark you whisper, I am not my worst moment. I am not my missed opportunity. I am the one who learns. I am the one who tries again. And in that trying you become free, not of mistakes but of self-condemnation. You begin to trust yourself again. And that might be the bravest thing you do. You lie still now and notice something subtle, a quiet within the quiet. Not the absence of thought, but the soft settling of it. Like dust finding its way to the floor after a long stirring. There's nothing extraordinary happening in this moment. No revelations. No grand declarations. And yet, there's a peace that wasn't here before. Because somewhere along this path, without realizing it, you began to make peace with the ordinary. For so long, you searched for meaning in the extraordinary. In the breakthrough, the epiphany, the dramatic shift. You thought if life didn't glow, sparkle, or transform loudly, then it wasn't changing at all. But now, something inside you understands. Real change is often quiet. It happens not in fireworks but in whispers. Not in leaps but in tiny, repeated steps. Not in the highlight moments, but in how you carry yourself in the space between them. The Stoics lived simple lives not because they lacked ambition, but because they saw where true richness lay. In the ordinary details. In how you pour your morning drink. In how you respond to someone's frustration. In how you spend an hour with no one watching. Marcus Aurelius wrote not as a performer, but as a man trying to hold onto decency in the middle of chaos. He journaled about being kind when it was hard, about noticing beauty in everyday patterns, about not wasting time wishing life felt different. And here you are now, reaching that same space. You realize that the kind of life you most admire isn't the one that's dramatic. It's the one that feels steady. The kind that doesn't need to be posted, praised, or proven. The kind that happens in small, consistent acts of courage and care. The kind that others may overlook, but you do not. You start to see your days differently now. That conversation you had that was just a little more honest. That meal you made with your full attention. That moment you walked slower, noticed the breeze, or laughed for no reason at all. Those moments are not filler. They are the fabric. And the more you let yourself be present in them, the more you realize you don't need a new life. You need new eyes. You think now of a moment when you were fully there. Not checking your phone, not mentally running errands, just there. Maybe it was washing dishes or petting a dog or lying under the sun. You didn't ask that moment to give you anything, and yet it gave you everything. This is the paradox. When you stop trying to squeeze meaning out of life, life offers it freely. And so you begin to trust the rhythm of the ordinary, not because you've given up on greatness, but because you've redefined it. To be fully alive, fully aware in the smallest acts, that is greatness. You remember someone once told you, nothing changes and everything changes. At the time, you didn't understand, but you do now. Because you still wake up in the same room, still brush your teeth, still do your work, still talk to the same people. But the way you do it, different, not rushed, not distracted, not waiting for some better moment to begin. This moment is the beginning, so you lie here in a space that doesn't need to be more than it is. You don't demand clarity from the night. You simply receive what it gives. Maybe you'll sleep deeply. Maybe your mind will wander. Either way, you remain soft toward yourself. You show up without needing the moment to perform for you. Because when you let go of expecting every moment to prove something, you free yourself to actually live in it. And life, when you really pay attention, doesn't need to be extraordinary to be beautiful. It just needs you to be there. And tonight, you are. You're starting to feel it now, not just in thought, but in your body. A shift, a deeper breath. A loosening of something that had been tightly held for far too long. You didn't even realize how tense you'd been. How much effort it took to carry the invisible weight of becoming. How often you looked over your own shoulder, asking silently, "Am I there yet?" But what if the better question is, "Am I here yet?" Presence has always been the quiet goal of all this. Every insight, every bit of Stoic wisdom, every whispered truth has been pointing you back to the same place. This moment, this breath, this exact version of you, lying quietly in the dark, doing nothing, being everything. The Stoics weren't just philosophers, they were realists. They understood that control was limited, life was brief, and people often struggled more with their own thoughts than with their circumstances. So they didn't offer grand strategies, they offered clarity. And clarity, when it lands, doesn't make a sound. It simply shifts the ground you walk on. You remember times you tried to force things, relationships, careers, clarity itself. You pushed harder, thought longer, analyzed deeper. You believed effort alone could unlock peace. But peace isn't unlocked, it's revealed. And only in stillness. You think now of the ocean. how its waves crash and roll, how its tides rise and fall. But beneath all that movement, there's a depth that remains still. Always. That stillness is in you, too. You don't need to build it. You just need to return to it. And you return not by striving, but by surrendering. Surrendering the illusion that you're late. Surrendering the story that says you need to earn your place. Surrendering the need to know what comes next. You don't. And you won't. And somehow that's a relief. You remember a scene, maybe from a film or maybe from life, where someone stopped mid-conversation, looked out the window, and just sat. They didn't explain. They didn't apologize. They just allowed themselves to be there without purpose. That's presence, and it's rarer than we admit, because most of us are haunted by the past or leaning into the future. We race forward to avoid regret. We look backward to avoid uncertainty. But the Stoics remind us, you are never more free than when you accept what is. You don't need to like it, but you do need to meet it, with open eyes, with steady breath, with the quiet dignity of someone who no longer fears themselves. You lie here now, and you feel that dignity beginning to root itself. You are not the story you've told. You are not the gap between where you are and where you imagined you'd be. You are not a disappointment waiting for redemption. You are a consciousness aware of itself, a life still unfolding, a presence deepening by the minute. And as that awareness settles in, so does something even softer: gratitude, not for things being perfect, but for being here to witness them at all. You feel it now, maybe in your chest, maybe in your belly, a sense of gentle wholeness. The world doesn't need you to be dazzling tonight. It doesn't need you to prove anything. It doesn't need your best version. It just needs you, quiet, still, present. And as you lie there, you realize this is it. This is what all the becoming was meant to lead to, not a trophy, not applause. Just a moment where you are finally, unmistakably you, without reaching, without explaining, without regret. And that's more than enough. There's a strange kind of peace that comes not from fixing, but from stopping the urge to fix. You feel it tonight. A stillness that isn't born of resolution but of release. You've spent so long trying to hold it all together, the plans, the image, the expectations, the story, and now your hands are open. Empty maybe, but no longer clenched. You've seen it before, how much effort goes into maintaining a version of yourself. How much energy is spent trying to meet expectations you never consciously agreed to. There's always some invisible audience, isn't there? Watching, judging, demanding consistency. But tonight you realize the performance is over, and there's no crowd left to impress. There's just you. You and this moment and the truth that's been waiting beneath all the effort. You don't need to be more. You just need to be. The Stoics knew this tension well. They understood the temptation to mold yourself into something acceptable, to play the part of the sage, to appear calm even when storms raged inside. But they also knew that real tranquility doesn't come from pretending to be unshakable. It comes from not minding when you are shaken. It comes from allowing your full humanity, the joy and the fear, the clarity and the confusion, to exist without panic, without shame, without rejection. You remember a conversation, maybe with someone wise or maybe with a part of yourself you hadn't listened to in a while. They didn't offer solutions. They didn't try to lift you out of your sadness. They just sat with you, fully, without agenda. And somehow that was enough. That's what you're offering yourself now. Not a rescue, not a reinvention, just presence. You're no longer trying to turn your life into a sculpture. You're allowing it to be a river. Some days rushing, some days still. Sometimes clear, sometimes murky, always moving. And in that flow, you begin to discover something the Stoics held dear. Equanimity, not happiness, not detachment, but a balanced soul, one that doesn't flinch from pain or grasp at pleasure, one that accepts the full cycle of things and learns to float through it with grace. You look back at the earlier versions of you, not with judgment but with tenderness. They tried, oh how they tried, to prove, to achieve, to matter, and you don't resent them for that. You thank them because their striving brought you here, to this quieter chapter, to this softer rhythm, To this truth that doesn't need to shout, you were never broken, you were just unfinished, and maybe you always will be, and that's okay. You don't need to arrive, you don't need to solve. You don't need to know exactly what comes next. You need only to stay open, soft, attentive, because when you do, you begin to feel life not as a challenge but as a companion, not something to overcome but something to join. You lie there now more like yourself than ever, not because you finally figured it all out, but because you stopped needing to. You no longer grip your identity like armor, you wear it like breath, and in that ease you find freedom. Not the kind that looks impressive, not the kind anyone can see from the outside, but the kind that lets you lie in bed, eyes closed, and feel completely, quietly whole. Nothing more to earn, nothing more to prove, nothing left to chase. Only this breath, and the next, and the next. There's a softness to this final stretch, not because everything is resolved, but because you're no longer resisting what remains unresolved. This is not a triumphant ending. No fireworks. No final twist. Just you, fully present, no longer rushing to become someone else, no longer bracing for what might go wrong. Just resting. You've spent so long trying to hold on to things that couldn't stay, trying to keep old stories alive, trying to live up to a version of yourself that no longer fits. But now, in this stillness, you begin to feel the shape of something deeper, peace. Not as a reward, but as what was always available once you stopped gripping the past. The Stoics knew this moment well. They called it ataraxia, a serene stillness of soul, a kind of calm that doesn't need explanation. The calm of knowing that you've done what you could, that you've lived according to your values, not your fears. And now, it's time to let even those go. Even the values can become weights if you cling to them too tightly. Even the wisdom can become a performance if you turn it into a checklist. So you let it all settle, like snow in a globe finally falling quiet. You return, gently, to the truth you've touched many times in this journey. You don't need to become who you thought you were supposed to be. You just need to be with who you are. Inhale. Exhale. You feel the echo of all the past versions of you, some hopeful, some afraid, some exhausted, and you thank them. They did their job, they got you here, but now they can rest. So can you. Even your longing, that ever-present ache to become something more, it softens. It doesn't vanish, but it no longer drives. It no longer confuses striving for growth with the fear of not being enough. Because now you've seen the difference. And what remains is space. Spaciousness in your chest, room in your thoughts. The freedom not to fill every silence with doing, fixing, proving. You are allowed to simply be. The Stoics never promised a life without pain. They didn't preach detachment as numbness. They preached involvement without entanglement, presence without control, love without demand. So you feel that now, that quiet kind of love for yourself, for this breath, for this life just as it is, unfinished, uncertain, but full of potential. You no longer chase the future to escape the present. You meet the future as it comes. No armor, no illusion. You remember the way a candle burns not with force but with stillness, a steady glow. That's how you carry yourself now. Not flashy, not loud, but steady. Even when things go dark again, and they will, you will know how to find your way. Not by running, but by returning. Returning to what is yours to carry. Returning to what is yours to choose. Returning to what is instead of what could have been. And now, as your breath slows and your thoughts quiet and the night gently holds you, you prepare to let go. Not because something is wrong, but because there is nothing left to fix. Just a softness waiting to wrap itself around you, a stillness waiting to be trusted, a peace waiting to be lived. You are home, you always were, so now you let it all drift. The stories, the striving, even the voice inside that gently guided you through all of this. It's okay to rest. You don't need to remember every insight. You don't need to hold onto every word. Let them settle like evening fog, soft and cool across the landscape of your mind. This is your moment to do nothing, to want nothing, to be no one except the quiet awareness behind your breath. You may feel weightless. You may feel heavy. Both are fine. You've stepped through a long inner journey, not to arrive at a finish line but to remember you never needed one. You've let go of who you could have been, not with regret, but with reverence. You've reclaimed the space inside yourself that was never broken, only waiting. You've traded expectation for presence, performance for peace. Now, let your body soften even more. Let your thoughts blur at the edges. Let sleep come not as escape but as return. And if sleep doesn't arrive right away, that's okay too. Stay here in this gentle hum of quiet truth. You are not unfinished. You are not late. You are not a failed version of anything. You are a living, breathing part of this night. And the night welcomes you, exactly as you are. No more reaching, just rest.